Hello, I'm Jan Newharth, Chair and Chief Executive Officer of the Freedom Forum. Welcome to First Five Now, a Freedom Forum conversation series that explores topical issues and features current newsmakers who are using the five freedoms of the First Amendment to guide their work. Today, Fiaz Rafiq talks about the new book, My Brother, Muhammad Ali, which provides an intimate profile of the heavyweight champion boxer as written by Rafiq and Ali's brother, Rahman Ali. The book offers an insider's perspective about one of the world's most famous and beloved sportsmen, whose life story exemplifies the freedoms found in the First Amendment. This program is brought to you by the Freedom Forum, which fosters First Amendment freedoms for all. Our vision is an America where everyone knows, understands, values, and defends the freedoms of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. And now, please welcome our moderator, John Maynard.
Thank you, Jan. Welcome to First Five Now. I'm John Maynard, Senior Director of Programs for the Freedom Forum. Earlier this year, the Freedom Forum opened the new exhibit, Fair Play, Athletes Speak, Assemble, Petition for Freedom, which tells the stories of athletes exercising their freedoms guaranteed by the First Amendment to shine a spotlight on injustice. The exhibit is currently on display at Washington's Dulles International Airport and Reagan National Airport, with many of the images coming from the museum collection. One of the athletes featured in the exhibit, and likely not a surprise to many of you watching, is Muhammad Ali. In the exhibit, we tell the story of the world heavyweight champion who, in the late 1960s, sacrificed his career by refusing to be drafted into the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War due to his religious beliefs. Ali's stance challenged Americans' attitudes about the war and inspired generations of athletes to stand up for their beliefs, even if it meant risking their careers. Ali's refusal to serve in Vietnam is just a chapter in the grand story of one of the world's most famous and beloved sportsmen. And while many articles, books, and even movies have been made about Ali, there has been one voice missing from the man who knew him best, his brother, Rahman Ali. We are so pleased to have the opportunity today to talk about Rahman's new book, My Brother, Muhammad Ali, which offers an insider's perspective on the well-known stories, as well as some stories you've never heard, about Ali. The book paints a rich portrait of a proud, polarizing, and sometimes vulnerable man. While we could not be joined by Rahman, we are happy to be joined by the book's co-author, Fiaz Rafiq. Fiaz is a professional sports and entertainment contributing writer for prominent newspapers and authors of biographies of Ali, Bruce Lee, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. He also remains close friends with members of Muhammad Ali's family. And Fiaz Rafiq joins us via audio today. Fiaz, welcome to First Five Now.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to join you.
So, of course, we would have loved to have talked to Rahman directly about his brother, about his book, but he is experiencing some health problems. So could you tell us how he's doing?
Yeah, sure. Rahman's not been feeling too well, but he's doing pretty good. He's doing pretty good. I spoke to his manager, Ron Brashear, and he's hanging in there, and he's feeling much better now, yes.
Okay. Well, we wish him well and wish he could join us today, but we're glad to have you here to talk about the book. Why don't you describe Rahman's relationship with his brother, Muhammad Ali?
Yeah, sure. Rahman is Muhammad Ali's only sibling, and he is probably the one human being who knew Muhammad Ali the best. He knew Ali because he grew up with him, and when they transitioned into adulthood, he was basically attached to Ali like a magnet. You know, they traveled together, they sparred together. Not many people know this, but Rahman was Muhammad's best sparring partner. Of course, Ali had many sparring partners, but he trusted Rahman, and they would spar on a regular basis. And this is a salient point. Ali had a extrovert personality, but Rahman had an introvert personality. They were kind of the polar opposites to each other. But I can say this with great conviction that Ali loved his brother more than anybody, along with their parents, of course, their mother and father. So they had this kind of a, great bond. I can't even put it into words, to be honest with you. They were so close. Ali obviously was at the forefront, and Rahman would stay in the background. But he was always with him wherever Ali went, whether they went abroad, where they traveled, etc. He was there with him, training with him. He would, be in his corner to pretty much, all his fights, etc. So they had this beautiful, wonderful, affinity and a bond. Yes.
Yeah, and Rahman himself was a competitive boxer also, correct?
Yes, that's correct. He boxed, but he retired in, I believe it was 1972, because on the advice of Muhammad, his brother, because Muhammad said he'd take care of him. He didn't need to box anymore. So I believe he had 20 fights, and he did pretty good. He did pretty good.
Right.
And not many people know this, but when they were growing up, sorry, I'm just going back a little bit. When they were growing
Yeah.
up, Rahman was somewhat much physically stronger and a physical specimen, compared to his brother. But obviously, Ali prevailed and just took, when he became a professional boxer, and just took the sport of boxing to a whole new level. Yes.
Right. And like his brother Muhammad Ali, Rahman did change his name, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. As soon as Muhammad joined the Nation of Islam, became a Muslim, Rahman naturally, followed him. Like I said, uh, they did everything together. They just
Right.
had this bond, and Rahman himself became a Muslim, and that was obviously another transition in their life where there were a lot of controversial elements attached to Ali becoming part of the Nation of Islam, which has been obviously for many many decades been out there in books, etc., in the news, etc. Yeah.
Right. Right. Fiaz, tell us about how you became involved with this project and working with Rahman on this book.
Yeah, sure. Initially, I had this idea, and I approached Ron Brashear, who's from Atlanta. He's Rahman's. Not only is he his manager, but he's actually the business partners. First, I was somewhat reluctant because obviously I had seen that there are so many Muhammad Ali biographies and books, and what new can you churn out? But after some contemplation, I decided that this book with a Ali family member must be written. Why? There's hardly any family members of Muhammad Ali who have written biographies, on Muhammad Ali, with the exception of, a couple of his daughters. So I felt, since the fact Rahman knew Muhammad more than anybody, he would have a lot of fascinating and intriguing stories and anecdotes that have never been revealed before. So it'd be from a perspective of a brother. So therefore, I felt that this would be a monumental project, and we discussed it, me and Ron, and we discussed it with Rahman, and basically, this is going back several years now. This is how a concept, an idea, eventually manifested into a reality, and Rahman was on board, and as they say, the rest is history. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Without revealing too much, because we want people to certainly purchase this book, and you can do that on various websites, of course. Um,
Sure.
What are some of the inside stories that Rahman shared? What do you remember hearing and being and you that you was new to you? Because as you said, there has been so much written about Muhammad Ali. So what's an example of something that someone might learn from reading his brother's account of Muhammad Ali?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as you know, the Muhammad Ali story i- is a huge. I mean, you can write several books. You know, you can write several books, volumes to tell the Muhammad Ali story. But obviously, like I mentioned, the first thing, first-hand is a first-hand witness. Rahman is a first-hand witness to, behind the scenes drama, to rare anecdotes. Had the front seat to Ali's boxing fights, etc. So there are stories that have never seen the daylight, and I won't go into many of them, but I would say that I was fascinated to hear Rahman, tell me the story about how they, when I say they, Muhammad Ali's entourage, including Rahman, in 1977, when the Rocky movie came out, starring Stallone, and they all packed into a Houston theater. That's where they saw the Rocky movie, at the time. And I hadn't, heard of this story anywhere, and I believe it's never been out there in the press or in any book. So it's things like this, stories that will really the readers will enjoy. There are revelations here, and this is just one of many revelations. Then there was a story about how Ali, endeavored to bring the Beatles together, in a charity, one-off charity, music event, etc. I mean, this is a rare story. I mean, it is out there, but Rahman tells it from his perspective. There are stories about several celebrities, etc. A lot of the stories, I think, because it is a intimate, is an intimate biography. There are a lot of stories about Ali, the father, Ali, the husband. So Rahman takes the reader, on a roller coaster ride behind the scenes. Literally speaking, it takes them into the, home of Ali. So we do learn a lot about Muhammad Ali beyond the confines of the boxing, his sports side. I can go on and on, John. But
Yeah,
the
no,
thing is, I will leave it. Yeah, yeah.
no, those are great stories, and there's so many more in the book. So we hope people will read this for sure. Obviously, one of the big themes in the book is Ali's activism, and in our new exhibit, we tell the story of his refusal to serve in Vietnam, and how he really did sacrifice his career, and in many ways, his life story exemplifies the freedoms found in the First Amendment. He freely exercised his religious faith. He spoke provocatively on a variety of topics using his free speech rights. The press covered him nonstop. Thousands assembled in support of him, and he petitioned the government to redress the injustice of his conviction for refusing military service. So, as the Freedom Forum is an organization that fosters First Amendment freedoms for all, this Muhammad Ali is really, his life story really tells the story of the First Amendment. What do you think drove him to become such an activist and take a stand, certainly when it comes to the Vietnam War?
Sure. I mean, at the height of the racial unrest, in the 1960s, Ali and Rahman had converted to Islam. So obviously they were part of this controversial group, Nation of Islam. And Ali earnestly believed it was plausible to change the system as he battled his most resilient foes, which was the American justice and the political system. I mean, it can be traced back, I'd say, to his childhood, because there are some stories in the book where he experienced racism, him and Rahman, when they were boys. I mean, there's a story where, they'd go to another neighborhood, predominantly a white neighborhood, and, they would be subjected to racist insults, etc. And one interesting anecdote I can reveal here is when Ali was, he must have been 5, 6 years old, he went with his mother into a store in his own neighborhood, I believe. And Ali was thirsty, and his mother asked for water, but the assistant refused to serve his mother. And actually, the security guard had to, assist his mother to leave the store. So, I mean, he all these racist experiences left an indelible impact on Ali. And I believe a seed, there was a, how can I put it, in his head a seed was planted, and he said to himself when he grew up, when he started boxing age 12, he would use boxing as a platform to fight for his people, fight for justice, fight for the black people. And obviously, we all know, he became a, he was at the forefront of, fighting for the black freedom, etc. So, like I said, it all stems from his childhood, how he was treated, his family was treated, badly, how the black people in Louisville were treated, were subject to racism, etc. And you know he became obviously an integral part of his fight for the blacks. He became a pivotal figure in history. But like I said, it all stems back from these experiences when he was a child and when he was a teenager, living in Louisville. Yeah.
Right. Certainly, one of the most famous stories, of course, which I mentioned, was his refusal to serve in Vietnam. Uh, that really, and he was at obviously the height of his career. So how did that change the trajectory of of his boxing career?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Ali's defiance, refusing to enlist in the armed forces, or go to Vietnam, had dire consequences on his career. I mean, in 1967, he was stripped of his title, he was fined $10,000, and he was banned for 3.5 years. And is another salient point I want to make is it was at the height of his career. I mean, he was in his peak, and he was in his peak, and these were his fighting years. But for 3.5 years, he was not allowed to fight. Now, how did this impact him? I mean, he had to resort to doing speeches at colleges, at campuses, etc., to make a living. So he lost millions of dollars, not being able to fight for 3.5 years. So as I understand, and as Rahman, has said, that his brother had to do speaking engagements, to eke out a living. And it was hard times. It was hard times. It also obviously gave the press, a chance to vilify him. So he was vilified by the press, and the American people, felt that he deserved that disdain. And obviously, um, years and years later, this would change. It would be reversed. So, in terms of, he became an American hero. When people realized and they became aware that the Vietnam War was uh, was wrong, basically, essentially speaking. So yes, I mean, financially, um, Ali had to take the hit, but also at the same time, he was probably the most hated, celebrity in America at that time. And we're talking about 1960s, 67 onwards here, obviously,
Right.
1967, late 60s and early 70s here. Yeah.
Yep. And once he was able to start boxing again, of course, we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of his legendary bout with Joe Frazier. And there was a lot written about that just last month when it was the anniversary. Tell us about that bout and what the impact that had on him going forward.
Yeah, sure, sure. obviously that was his first professional loss, John. I mean, it
Yeah.
was fight of the century, where there were hundreds and hundreds of press passes given out, you know, for the newspapers, the TV people, etc. You know, the broadcasters, etc. So there was a the fight was hyped up around the world, and the world tuned in. Uh, it's interesting to note that, literally speaking, he brought New York, he brought the country to a standstill, so to
Mhm.
speak. You know, this fight was huge. The impact he had on Ali in terms of his loss. I mean, Ali was cognizant of the fact that defeat was part of boxing. You know, we're all human beings. You know, we lose, we win, and we have to get up and we got to move on. And this was Muhammad Ali's, you know, thought process at the time. And he said he'd be back. And as we all know, he prevailed. He triumphed against Frazier twice. Once in 1970, Thriller in the Manila in 1975, and the other fight was in 1973. So he came back and took his so-called revenge, if I may put it that way. So he beat Frazier twice. I mean, obviously, the rivalry, uh, this rivalry between Frazier and Ali, you know, came to define them both as they navigated their way to the sport's highest level. Now you see boxers and UFC fighters, you know, they create this rivalry, and it sells tickets, you know, and it brings, you know, the fight to the fans' attention. But Muhammad Ali was probably one of the first one to, you know, do this. And the rivalry between him and Frazier will always be, you know, remembered and is part of boxing history, definitely.
Absolutely, absolutely. Rafiq, Fiaz, I'll leave you on this question, and this is a question on behalf of Rahman, but also for you. You know, what do you hope people get out of reading this book? What do you hope they, as we said, we've read a lot about Ali. There's been movies made about him, but you know, what do you hope people get out of this book about Muhammad Ali?
Yeah, sure. First of all, like I mentioned early on, John, you have to go back to the source. Now, what is the source? There have been a lot of biographies and books written about Ali, but in this case, there's nothing better than reading a book written by a close family member who knew, in this case, who knew uh, Muhammad Ali more than anyone. So that's first, you know, that's very important. So is the source. I mean, the Muhammad Ali story is obviously an important part of history. You know, I mean, he's a pivotal figure of the century, and he garnered, you know, adulation, and who endeared himself to millions. Now, his fan base is beyond the confines of the sporting sphere. You know, I mean, I've personally, you know, met people from all walks of life who, you know, love Muhammad Ali, and that is a key element. Muhammad Ali has a fan base beyond the confines of the boxing sphere. So he how can I put it? He was able to endear himself to so many people around the globe, not just America, you know, not just the Western world, etc. Yeah. So in terms of what can somebody, the reader, take away from this book, I believe the reader will find this a riveting read. He/she will take away, you know, a new perspective on the greatest sportsman of the century, Muhammad Ali, and they will learn some new stories and anecdotes, and they will be able to learn more about Muhammad Ali, not just the fighter, not just the sports figure, but Muhammad Ali the man, Muhammad Ali the father, Muhammad Ali the brother, Muhammad Ali the son. So I believe this book, you know, I can say with great conviction, this book is one of the most intimate biographies ever written on Muhammad Ali, and you have to hand it to Rahman. And I'm glad he's written the book, because he's 78 years old now. I'm glad he was able to tell his perspective, before he, passes away. And like I said, it's part of history. Yeah.
Well said. The book is My Brother, Muhammad Ali, Fiaz Rafiq. Thank you for joining us today on First Five Now.
It's a pleasure, John, and I really appreciate it. And I will let Rahman know that you guys really wanted him on, but obviously, due to his circumstances, that could not happen, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yes, please do send us our regards. And to our viewers, we hope you'll join us this Monday, April 12th at 2 p.m. for day one of our week-long Free Expression Festival, which features conversations with honorees and presenters of this year's Free Expression Awards, which are happening on Thursday, April 15th. On Monday, we feature Miami Herald humor columnist Dave Barry in conversation with Washington Post columnist Alexander Petrie. For more information, visit freeexpressionawards.org. And of course, you can always visit freedomforum.org for all information on programs and initiatives. Thank you all for joining us for First Five Now.